Namaste, Jai Hind. You're watching or listening to another edition of the ANI podcast with Smita Prakash. This episode is focused on the Canadian elections, which are to be held on April 28th. Why should Indians be concerned about elections in Canada? Well, unless you've been living under a rock, you would know that India-Canada relations are at a rock bottom now. And mostly we have former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to thank for that. Trudeau resigned and has quit the scene for now. Everyone had thought that he had ruined it for the Liberals and it's going to be mighty easy for the Conservatives to come to power. But wait, nothing is predictable about politics, right? Not even in Canada. Enter Trump 2.0 and everything changes about the Canadian elections. How and why, I will leave it to our guest today to explain to us in greater detail. But at the time of filing this report, Liberals seem to have inched ahead with 43% approval ratings as opposed to the Conservatives at 39%. This marks a significant shift from the late 2024 when the Conservatives had a substantial lead. The change follows Justin Trudeau's resignation and the subsequent rise of Mark Carney as the new Liberal leader. But a new poll suggests that Conservatives have narrowed the gap. My guests today have appeared on the ANI podcast before. Ajay Bisaria, former Indian High Commissioner to Canada, author and commentator on diplomacy, especially with regard to Pakistan and Canada. Kushal Mehra, author and podcaster who divides his time between Canada and India, speaks extensively on the Khalistan issue in Canada and its impact on India-Canada relations. Thank you guys for coming on the show. I have Kushal. This is a standard joke on us. We call जो बार बार आते हैं हमारे पॉडकास्ट में हम उनको आरपीजी बुलाते हैं repeat performance guests. So both of you have appeared on the show. Thank you so much for talking about Ajay ji has come because of Pakistan. I think we discussed with Tilak and his book. Kushal तुम्हारे साथ तो किताब भी and then Canada and caste and everything. So today of course Canadian elections. Vote diya? Can you vote?
No, I can't. I'm a landed immigrant. My wife will.
Has voted in by postal ballot?
Yeah,
or?
so she'll be doing that. So it starts from the 18th. It opens up on the 18th. Mail-in ballots, 18th of April.
Okay, so 28th is the elections. So first let's begin with the basics as to why should Indians be interested in Canadian elections. I'll go with you, sir.
Okay, so I think these elections are an inflection point. And if you see the India-Canada relationship in the last 18 months, it sort of bottomed out at the end of last year with the expulsion of the top Indian diplomats. You know, that's the equivalent of the nuclear option in diplomacy. If you decapitate the Indian diplomatic leadership, the High Commissioner, the Consul General in Toronto, all expelled, so that it reached its bottom point. But at that point, both countries said, let's not let it sink deeper. So there was that sense.
We also did it. We also sent them back.
Yeah, we also sent them back, but we played it cool. Because you see, what happened that India didn't do all the things it did when the crisis started. Because there was no stoppage to visas, there was no stoppage to flights, there was no stoppage to business. So what India said that this is essentially a Trudeau government problem. And we will treat it as such. It's a serious problem, but we will not let it infect other parts of the relationship, which is the business relationship, $100 billion plus of investment in India, plus the tourism, the travel, the visas, and so on. We did not want the political relationship to interfere with that. So what we are seeing now in the Canadian elections, and more than that with Trudeau's exit, is an inflection point. So that inflection point gives us space for diplomacy on both sides to retrieve that relationship. And, if you divide that relationship into three buckets, the political government to government, the business to business, the people to people, the others were sort of functioning fine, but the government to government relationship had plunged. Now, what we hope is with the elections, whether it's Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre, we have an inflection point where we can take this relationship to a better place. And both sides get more space for diplomacy, and this crisis hopefully would have played itself out, and we get to a better space on the other end.
Okay, Kushal, what's your take? Why should India be looking at it? And do you agree with Ajay when he says that India basically had a Trudeau problem? I think that's
No, I
one of the
don't.
things.
I don't think India has a Trudeau problem. I think India has a Canada problem.
Okay.
The entire system, Canada has a uniparty as far as India is concerned. This is the mistake that I think Indian foreign policy assessment has made in the last 20 odd years when it comes to Canada. Prime Minister Harper was the aberration, not the norm. You look at relationships before Prime Minister Harper or after Prime Minister Harper. There is only, it was because of Prime Minister Harper being the personality that he was, he actually nipped a lot of these things in the bud. For example, Prime
With
Minister.
both, at that time, I think he overlapped with Manmohan Singh and with Modi,
Yes,
right?
yes. And
Okay.
the beauty
And
is.
not to forget, he signed the strategic partnership agreement with Modi. When Modi went in 2015, Harper and Modi signed a strategic partnership agreement. So we are strategic partners.
Prime Minister
yeah.
Harper had a policy that I will not go to, let's say, any extremist place, irrespective of identity, right? Anybody who spreads extremism, I will not go there. But that has not been the case before him or after him. After him, whether it's Mr. Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh, the less I say, the better, or whether it's Trudeau. I mean, Mark Carney, he has not, because, I mean, he's barely been Prime Minister.
Sure.
And can we really consider him to be a Prime Minister? He's not fought any election. Basically, he fought a primary where I think 150 or 200,000 odd people voted. And they elected him Prime Minister. He can't enter the parliament, which is why they had to go for a snap election 5 months before. So, as my opinion is completely different. I think India genuinely has a Canada problem. It doesn't mean Canada is an enemy nation. It means we have a problem, and it is cutting across the political system of Canada. And it is a mixed bag because A, Canadian politicians actually don't understand India, and B, there is a single group of people of Indian origin who don't like to call themselves Indian because it hurts them a lot, i.e. the Khalistanis. They have such a disproportionate influence on the Canadian body politic, which I think Indian foreign policy is just living in denialism. And the sooner we get over this denialism about it doesn't mean Khalistanis are awesome. It just means we have a problem. And we have a problem to solve. And the sooner we do that, the better off we will be. As far as this election is concerned, this election is going to be a real test for Canadian democracy, not for anything else. Because what is happening right now in that election is fascinating, because 6 months ago, when Trudeau was the Prime Minister, every single poll was showing that Pierre Poilievre is going to sweep this election.
Exactly, yeah.
And the moment Trudeau is out, Carney comes in. What was that meme? Waqt badal gaye, jazbaat badal gaye, takdeerein badal gayi.
The cricket one.
Yeah, that one. And now you have a neck-to-neck election where you could some polls say the Liberals are winning. Main Street just came up with a poll recently, I think 3 days ago.
Yeah.
When Main Street shows now Pierre is making his ground up, we could well be in a situation where we have a minority government, right? Because what has happened is, what we have to understand sitting in India is, Canada had a Trudeau problem. Canada did not have a Liberal problem, if the polls are right. So the Trudeau problem is solved. They are all going back to the Liberals, and they did not like Jagmeet Singh, which is why you see Jagmeet Singh's numbers, the NDP numbers, which always float around a 17 to 20% vote percentage, has gone into single digits. And all that vote has gone to the Liberals, which is why they have propped up. As far as India is concerned.
Wait 1 second, let me just interrupt you. When you talk about a minority government, you're talking about something like what happened earlier with Trudeau,
Yeah.
where he needed Jagmeet's propping up because otherwise his government would fall. So there was this gun to his head, I don't know, then it became a Stockholm syndrome, I would guess.
But this time you might be having a case where conservatives might be at 150, 160, so they can't form a government. Liberals might be hovering around 140. They can't form a government because the NDP and bloc numbers are not enough to prop them to the magic number. It could well be a possibility. That's what I'm trying to say. So sab atke rahenge, and it will be even harder for India to resolve the relations in that scenario with Canada.
Okay.
Because आप अपने आप को एक प्रश्न पूछो, if a country the diaspora over there overall is around 5 to 7%, depending on how many people you count. If you count all the illegals also, you can say 7.5%, half a percent point increase hoga. But the disproportionate influence a single set of people have on Canadian politics, and you can see what is happening in individual nominations and ridings in certain areas where people of Indian origin live.
That's also, some of them couldn't get their nominations.
Oh yeah, I can name
Yeah.
5 such names. Now, the most peculiar case is what is happening in a riding called Abbotsford, South Langley, where there were two names that were floating around. One was this guy who's been, a member of the provincial parliament, Mike de Jong, who has, worked in the British Columbia legislature for the longest time, and he was trying to stake claim. And there was this other guy, Schaefer, who was also trying to stake claim. And then last moment, a guy, a 24 or 26-year-old gentleman named Sukhman Gill, is just skyrocketed. No processes are followed, which are the internal processes of the Conservative Party of Canada. He's just dumped on that constitution. Just today, Mike de Jong has tweeted an entire thread explaining what happened with him, why he's fighting independent, and the retiring sitting Conservative Party MP of that area is endorsing the independent candidate, not this Conservative Party candidate. So allegedly, what I hear from the sources inside the community in Abbotsford and in other parts of Canada is basically जो भारत में होता है वो वहाँ हुआ है.
Which is?
बांटा जाना.
Okay.
So वो भाई ये जो पंजाबी में कहता है ऐसा वाकफ है, घुसेड़ दिया जबरदस्ती का. And the people are so pissed off now. Imagine this, and this is Abbotsford. Now there are many cases. There was I don't know his second name, but his first name is Keshav. उनकी nomination cancel हो गई. उसका तो article भी आया था pointer.com पे. A journalist had written a detailed article how ridings are being hijacked by these elements. Then there was another case of Don Patel in Etobicoke. For some odd reason, Don Patel ka naam cancel ho jata. He was called, he was even brought on the stage by Pierre Poilievre, and then Don Patel ka nomination cancel ho jata. And you know what the reasons were? I saw that article, and usme likha tha, he liked a post which was against Khalistan. I mean, come on, yaar. This is what is happening. And
okay, I'm going to come to the whole Gujarati community thing, because once we had talked about it, it's the second largest Indian community after the Sikhs in Canada. And which way do they vote, and do they vote in a particular manner about the Gujaratis? I'll come to that. First, let's get back to the 101 of Canadian elections. I just want to know, when you were talking about minority government and all, Ajay ji, just explain clearly, is the system like the Indian system where you vote for a party and the party selects a prime minister, or is it like the American system where it's Trump or Biden and it's personality based?
Well, so it's clearly a parliamentary system closer to what we have in India than what they have to their southern neighbor, than the US. It is a parliamentary system, and exactly like in our parliament, it would mean that the government would go to the halfway majority coalition, let's say, or the party which has the support of the minority parties.
Okay.
And in this case, it's a largely two-party system with smaller parties involved. So, as Kushal was saying, there's Liberals, Conservatives, and there's also the Bloc Québécois, and the NDP, which was headed by Jagmeet Singh, but the polls are saying that's headed for, single digit or decimation. But, let me agree with some of what Kushal said and disagree with some of it if you zoom up to the larger picture.
Okay.
Now, what is the larger picture? I would agree with him that there is a certain capture disproportionate capture by a very smart and active anti-India Khalistani group, right? But this is a structural reality in Canadian politics for 4 decades, at least 4 decades. We've seen this in operation for a while. And these folks have a certain capture. But this election is not about them. I mean, they will not be a major determinant of the fate of this 28th April election. Because I would argue that this election is about Trump. The joke was that they were saying initially Chinese interference and then Indian interference, and then a foreign interference commission said no, there was really no real interference. But again, in the campaign trail, India was again
Yeah.
kind of mentioned that Indian interference. If there is one country that's interfered or influenced this election, it is the southern neighbor. Donald Trump made sure that Trudeau exited early by calling him the governor of Canada
Yeah.
multiple times. He has been a godsend for Mark Carney to be able, because this is really a referendum about who can deal with the new United States with the Trump challenge. So while it's good to have a conversation about the micro detailing of the ridings where some of these guys have an extra influence, they have a certain capture, the pro-Khalistani elements. This election is not about them. The broader point I'm making is that we are at an inflection point, and if Canada acts in its national interest, now that the relationship with the United States is troubled, with China was already troubled, India becomes a sort of natural partner to talk to if Canada is talking in its national interest and not in the interest of a small vocal minority which is smart at capturing, parts of the polity. So I would say that after the election, we still have good prospects to build this relationship, exchanging high commissioners, possibly even signing a trade agreement. I would argue that this is a time to stabilize the relationship and normalize it, notwithstanding this 40-year problem of vocal Khalistanis trying to queer the pitch.
So is Mike Carney better than Justin Trudeau for India? If
Well-
in case
Well,
Carney
I
wins.
would argue anyone not called Trudeau.
Mark Carney, sorry.
Anyone not called Trudeau is good for the relationship because it was plunged.
Okay, we've had father and son, so hopefully no more Trudeaus for some time.
By what Trudeau said and did and the way he acted. And even the security part of the relationship, we've seen it being handled in other geographies. We saw the United States handle a similar parallel case of Pannu. And, what they said was, look, we have a great relationship with India. We have a terrible security problem. Let's talk about it. Let our security experts talk about it. The equivalent of what Trudeau did would have been for Biden to walk to the White House lawn and say, listen, we have a huge problem with India. They knocked off or they tried to kill somebody. That's not the way it's done.
Yeah.
Trudeau didn't leave room for diplomacy. What should have happened and what should now happen is that the adults in the room, the security folks, should say we have a serious problem, let's talk about it, and reach closure on that pre-existing problem. I think that is the fundamental problem. The noise being made by some folks particularly in the heat of the election campaign, I think is not a significant factor.
Okay, the Conservatives were doing well till December, till Trump came in.
Yeah.
Then Trump comes in and he says what he had to say. That was like Ajay ji said, God sent for Carney. Otherwise, Carney kahan? Polive was winning.
Yeah, but see,
Everything was going right for them.
No, see,
but also, Carney has gone to a Gurdwara last week for Baisakhi. He went.
Yeah, but notice
he
the
did
photos.
that. He went for that. Polive gaya tha ki nahi gaya tha?
नहीं, वो नहीं गया.
I don't think वो गया.
See, so there are 4 or 5 things you have to look at it. Yes, Trump has played a significant role, but Pierre Poilievre's voting percentage has not dropped. He's still 5 percentage points up from the last federal
But he
election.
hasn't specified what his view, at least till the first debate, at end of first debate, he's not specified what he's going to do as far as the tariffs and the Trump positioning is concerned. He's not making it very clear.
He's not, right? That's the problem with the Conservative
But it's
Party.
literally become that, right? Canadians are going to vote the next prime minister or the next party based on how they're going to deal with America.
So let's look at the larger view of what Canada is as a society. In my experience, Canada is a largely left-leaning society, in my opinion. Most Canadians lean left. Even the Canadian Conservative Party is not really right-wing. They are very centrist in most of their views. So in a largely left-leaning society, when a person like Donald Trump comes, add to that a significant chunk of Canadian identity, honestly, and especially of the Canadian left, is we're not America. And here comes an American
ये
president.
उनकी आइडेंटिटी है.
One of the factors. I'm not saying it's the only factor.
Okay.
One of the significant factors is we're not America. We're different. Yes, we have a very good neighbor down south. We have nice relations with them. When Trump started trolling them, and he did what he did, the Canadian left rallied behind their left-wing party. They dumped NDP. See, the reason Pierre was so comfortably ahead was, aap samjho, I mean, in NDP was like a vote cutter that time, right? NDP was splitting the left-wing vote. Now the left-wing vote is getting consolidated, so the Liberals are looking very good.
So then he's right in saying that the NDP doesn't matter anymore then
The
in this
NDP
election.
in this election,
तो वो
they
vote
don't
कट हुआ
matter.
नहीं है.
Right, अभी नहीं होएगा. वो वही हो रहा है. And Trump has basically consolidated the left-wing vote. What is very interesting is even Maxime Bernier, the People's Party, last federal election, he had 5% votes. He's also down from 5% to less than 2%
So it's
in all
literally a
polls.
referendum on which way are you going to fight Trump.
Yes, that both sides are fighting Trump. Even Pierre
Also it's Canadian अस्मिता का सवाल है.
हाँ पता नहीं काय की अस्मिता मगर ठीक है. But see, where I disagree with him is, yes, the election is being made about Trump, because now recently there was Sam Cooper shared that. Sam Cooper is a respected Canadian journalist. He said how the Chinese Communist Party actually wants this thing about Trump to remain, to be a significant part, because that's apparently working, because allegedly the Chinese Communist Party has deep investments in the Liberal Party of Canada. I mean, you have to follow the work of Sam Cooper and the Bureau. It's brilliant work. I mean, I am a subscriber, so I follow Sam's work, and it's very interesting how the politics works out. But what happens is, I mean, I'm sure he also knows that the road to Ottawa does not go without 905. What in Canada is called the 905 code.
What's that?
Greater Toronto region.
अच्छा.
There are 30 ridings there.
Toronto.
Yes, Greater Toronto, so Mississauga, Brampton, and all that area. There are 30 ridings there, and the reason the reason Harper managed to win is he managed 905 very well. He did significant outreach in the 905 region, and that was the occasion where the Conservatives, even after the ethnic change in the 905 region happened, with so many Indians and Pakistanis and other ethnicities coming there. But he managed to win because Harper got the politics of that area right. Nobody can be in power now in Canada without managing the 905 region. That's just a fact. And you can check articles from 2011, articles from 2018, as early as 2 weeks ago. Everybody in Canada knows 905 decides the fate of Canada.
So then why didn't Polyev go for Baisakhi celebration?
Because, no, Polyev is now, see,
वो इतना confident है क्या?
वो confident नहीं है. See, now I'm glad you've asked this question. You remember that Diwali fiasco of Pierre? वो जब उसने दिवाली इवेंट कैंसिल किया था last year, October, November में. So it has all started going downhill for him in the 905 region since that day. I had the email of them cancelling the event from day one.
You tweeted about the
I held back because some of, I spoke to people inside the Conservative Party of Canada. As my job is as a person who talks about news and politics. I was like, I have this email. They requested me to hold back. I was like, listen, I'm being very honest. They requested me personally to hold back. Give us a few days. We are rearranging the event. I was like, okay. And then they did not, and they tried some sly tactic. Their campaign team, which has, many people, like Jenny Byrne runs the whole show. Arpan Khanna is the national outreach head. And all these people, they started to blow, no, there is all fake news, all these people. Then I had to share the screenshot. And then that event showed how their politics of the 905 region is, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. There are good candidates who are really See, Indian community in general is a naturally conservative community. Naturally conservative है वो लोग. Fiscally वो लोग को small government अच्छी लगती है, and even socially they have conservative values. Imagine this vote bank was like जिसको बोलते हैं ना थाली में परोस के waiting for you, and then you do that Diwali event. See, this was an event held by Mr. Deepak Oberoi, who was a veteran Canadian member of parliament. He was a pillar of our community, and he used to do this event with others at the Parliament Hill. Now look at the irony. His daughter, Preeti, is fighting from the Liberal Party ticket against the Conservative candidate. This is where things have come down to. So the reason Pierre Poilievre's politics has been messed up in this entire thing. See, one thing I have to give to the Liberals, while I criticize them all the time, they play ethnic politics better than the Conservatives. See, Conservatives का क्या होता है? They try to behave like सस्ते Liberals. That's what they do. They look at what is Chacha doing. And then they try to ape Chacha. Chacha is original. They are always going to win. Look at Mark Carney's campaign till now. Do you see Mark Carney's photos with any those Khalistani flags around? किधर भी नहीं दिखेगा. Trudeau छोड़ दो. Trudeau was he is absolutely right when he says genuinely Trudeau मतलब वो तो विचित्र प्राणी था. मगर आप note करो, see these things when you are a political observer, you have to see how smart Mark Carney is.
Yeah.
He's so sharp. वो इधर नहीं जाएगा, ऐसे नहीं. He will entertain everyone, but he will not publicly show it. अभी मार्क करनी था, रामनवमी का हुआ. See, these are small messages, right? पियर पॉलिएव का आप देखो, कुछ कोई मैसेजिंग नहीं है रामनवमी के उधर. यार तुम पॉलिटिशियन हो, अच्छी पॉलिटिक्स तो खेलो ना. 905 is such an important region, यार 30 riding है.
It's not just the Sikhs. There are also
more Hindus. There are more Hindus in the 905 region.
A Hindu region.
And
तो आप
Hindus सिर्फ वो नहीं है ना. Hindus Caribbean भी तो है ना. क्या वो Canadian नहीं है क्या? So I know so many Caribbean Hindus in that region. See, first of all, we need to get out of this mindset that Hindus only come from India. They come from all over the world.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Hindus are there, Caribbean. So आप note करो, when 905 has more Hindus than Sikh, and in that also minuscule Khalistanis, the major Khalistani chunk is in British Columbia. In fact, in Ontario, हमारे वहाँ तो इतना है भी नहीं. खालिस्तान का वो ब्रैम्पटन में तो मतलब ये हवा बना के रहा. वो सब ब्रिटिश सरी और एबट्सफोर्ड के उधर है. यार आपकी पॉलिटिक्स ही बेवकूफ़ाना है. Mark Carney on Ram Navami very smartly takes Anita Anand, goes on BAPS मंदिर. Note करो, BAPS was not allowing Trudeau in. Sir will back me up. आप note करो, after the India fiasco, BAPS were not calling Trudeau. ट्रूडो की फोटो दिखाओ. आफ्टर द फियास्को ट्रूडो बैप्स में नहीं गया बिकॉज द कम्युनिटी हैड क्यूमुलेटिवली डिसाइडेड इसको बॉयकॉट ही कर देंगे. द मोमेंट ट्रूडो इज ड्रॉप्ड, कार्नी क्या करता है? पहुंच जाता है. माई पॉइंट इज दैट कंजर्वेटिव्स हैव मेस्ड देयर ओन पॉलिटिक्स अप. सो अ लॉट ऑफ द ब्लेम इज देयर ओन. दिस वाज अ एंड लुक एट पिकरिंग में आई कैन गिव यू नेम्स ऑफ गुड decent hard-working people. Now, Ruchi Wali is married to a Punjabi, right? Ruchi was working very hard in Pickering. उसका नाम साफ कर दिया. कितने ऐसे मैं आपको नाम दे सकता हूँ. मैंने आपको केशव का बोला, डॉन पटेल का बोला, और भी ऐसे कैंडिडेट्स हैं. These people, anybody who is pro-Canada and not aligned to a Khalistani basically ends up being dabbagul. Is what is happening. And in such a crucial area where 30 parliamentary seats are there, and out of them at least 17 to 18 have an Indian population overload out of the 30. Are these guys insane? Imagine आज last year जब वो सेंट पॉल्स का बाई इलेक्शन हुआ था टोरंटो में, it is a liberal bastion. Conservatives won that riding in the by election. अब मैं आपको बोल रहा हूँ वापस इलेक्शन होगा, हार जाएंगे. अच्छा आयरनी, मिसिसागा, ब्रैम्पटन, अब भी फेडरल इलेक्शन नहीं, प्रोविंशियल इलेक्शन हुए. He's famously called Fat Trudeau, Doug Ford. It's the running joke. I mean, we all call him Fat Trudeau. I'm sorry. He तीसरी बार जीत के आया हमारा बादशाह. He swept Mississauga and Brampton. Not even a single riding was lost. He is also in the conservative side, right? He's called progressive conservative. The federal conservatives and the provincial conservatives are different entities. It is not like BJP state में भी है और center में भी है. These guys are different. But look, they all voted for a provincial conservative 4 weeks ago, and the polls are showing they are voting
neck
liberal.
to neck.
They are voting liberal.
The debates are still to come, so let's see what happens.
One debate होगी, वो भी
one
debate क्या
is
होगा?
two more are left, no?
नहीं
I think
से
or maybe. But who knows whether the debates impact that much, you know,
Time
or
क्या
have
मिलेगा?
people already decided? Yeah.
5 कैंडिडेट होंगे उधर और सब लोग बोलेंगे.
And it's too close to polling day. That's what, you know, I mean,
So, Smita, let me
fence
say
sitters
the
hai.
big picture point from what Kushal is saying. You know, we're getting into the
Nitty-gritties,
detailing of...
sure.
So, the big picture is that we have a situation where the Liberals were the incumbents for 10 years. and there was a strong anti-incumbency sensed in the pre-Trump era, which was really giving a big ballast to Pierre Poilievre of the Conservatives, because it was a pre-Trump era and pre-Trudeau's exit era. Now, that suddenly flipped with the arrival of Trump,
yeah.
and the related arrival of Mark Carney, heading the Liberals. So, that anti-incumbency advantage seemed to fade away because it was now almost a referendum on Trump. Now, what Kushal is talking about is the diaspora, and the diaspora of 2 million is 850,000 to a million Sikh and a million non-Sikhs, as you mentioned, and there's probably a million other floating around with Indian passports. Now, this is an important enough constituency. Both candidates are obviously wooing them in their own way. Kushal's point is the Conservatives are not doing it as effectively as the Liberals are. But this is traditionally what happens. They woo them, they go to the mandirs, they go to the gurdwaras, they have those conversations. But I think the big picture point really here is that it is about Trump. They will both try to woo the Indian diaspora in their own ways.
Sure.
And the question here is whether the Liberals are doing it more successfully because they have a new face, or whether the Conservatives continue to do it. I think that is up to the diaspora to tell us who they're buying the argument better.
I have a question. Suppose I'm a student in India and I want to apply for universities abroad. America mein there's a new problem. You don't know whether after you finish your 4 years of undergrad studies, whether there's that OPT system hoga ya band kar denge Trump, kya kuch nahi pata. Even if I'm applying for masters, so that becomes a problem. Now, if I'm looking at Canada, or if I'm a parent whose child wants to study in Canada, how should they see this? Because there's not much time, right? They have to apply for colleges now and decide by June which way to go, because admissions happen August, the classes begin.
Yeah.
So should they opt for Canada or shouldn't they opt for Canada at this stage? What is your advice?
I would advise them to opt for Canada, because Canada, relatively speaking, still remains a welcoming geography. What happened in the last 3 years in the education corridor was great turbulence and turmoil. 40% drop in number of fresh admissions. Why? Because two processes collided. One was the political process. So the parents are saying, oh my God, we are at war with Canada, things are troubled, we can't send our kids there. And secondly, Canada pressed the pause button on student immigration because they had problems internally. So they had problems.
That's because of their universities.
Rents going up, universities, social issues, all
those
kinds
commuter
of stuff.
colleges and stuff like that.
And exactly, those hole-in-the-wall colleges, and so they press pause to look at it. But I think the good universities, the big universities, will continue to get a certain number of students. There would be a correction in the immigrant students' numbers. People who were just using this route to get into hole-in-the-wall colleges to get to Canada and then make a life there. But for genuine students, Canada, I think, will continue to be welcoming. And I would maintain an optimistic view of how Canada will shape up after these elections, regardless of who wins.
Who wins? Okay.
Because, this correction will have happened. And I think, particularly on India-Canada relations, there would be an appetite to stabilize the relations this year and try and normalize them next year.
Kushal, you know of many parents whose children are studying in America.
Don't send your kids right now.
Don't send your kids.
No, because, and it's not that the universities are not good. I'm a product of that university system, York University. But no, don't send your kids right now. It's just too expensive. Housing is a mess.
And after tariffs, it's going to become more expensive.
Why would you want to ruin your child's life? I seriously don't understand this. Don't send your children there. The housing crisis is really palpable, Smita. You go and you've experienced it, and then I mean, I've told you too last time that I've helped the girls, who were...
And also that when you were talking about this, like several students cramped into one room
It's
because the
depressing.
rents are so
It's
expensive,
depressing.
and then there are no jobs.
बिल्कुल नहीं.
You know, जो पहले करते थे, going and working in a McDonald's, or they can't work on tables. It's hard. There's an anti-immigrant sentiment also,
Which is palpable. Did you know
Yeah.
in the last 1 year, 3 or 4 of our Sikh kids and 1 or 2 of our Hindu kids, all Indian kids, have lost their lives. There is no definitive answer on whether they were because of random crime or whether it is because of race-based crime. The police reports are not clear till now, so I will hold back on that judgment. But the pressure is real. I personally helped 4 to 5 girls by giving them money because they were being sexually exploited by landlords or people. Yeah, Smita, it's really bad. I don't know why in any parent in their right mind would send. अगर आपके पास करोड़ों रुपए है, आप करोड़पति हो इंडिया में, then you send your child to study to a good university in Canada. That means a Waterloo, a Western, a York University, McGill, these kinds of. If you don't have money, please don't send them to a Ryerson, even a Humber or Brampton diploma mills. So please.
No,
माफ
so I
करो.
think there is already a lot of awareness happening in India, because for the first time ever, Punjab mein there's been a drop in the number of
86% drop.
Yeah, look at that.
Well,
So
no, in
I
some
went to
parts.
Punjab just a few weeks ago, and I was amazed that every fifth hoarding in Punjab in India is leave Punjab. Basically, it is very very interesting. But yes, even over there, the Canadian bhoot, the is dying down. They have realized that they were being exploited, and exploited by their own people.
Yeah, yeah.
Living in Canada.
Sure, of course.
And it's insane. But right now is not a good time to go to Canada. There are much better options if you want to get skills. I'm not saying Canadian universities are bad. I again repeat, I am a product of that system. But the point is, right now, you can't live in substandard basements and expect a child to learn something. There are just too many cases right now in Canada, and we still are at an inflection point as far as housing pressures and many other things are concerned. Why do you want to go there?
And Kushal, another thing which I want you to clarify for me is, when you say this isn't, it is difficult for a non-Punjabi, non-Sikh, non-Hindu, or irrespective of whether
Indians should not go
Indian.
there. I am saying Indians should not go there. मतलब मेरे को यार, it's not मेरे तो पंजाब में भी listeners हैं ना, मैं तो उनको भी यही बोलता हूँ ना जाओ. So it's not that. And there is not a day that goes by where I don't get an email, because of the podcast listener base is so huge in Canada.
जाएं कि ना जाएं.
हाँ, they just random kids, भैया जाऊँ नहीं जाऊँ क्या करूँ. And no, don't. Right now, your mental health is also something.
Yeah.
क्या तुमने
Risk
झंडे गाड़ना है?
factor.
But the question they'll ask you is kahan jaye? You
Haan.
know, if you're telling me don't go to Canada, where can I go? Which is a more welcoming
there are
geography?
Southeast Asia में बहुत attractive options हैं. If you want to get skills and get educated, there are good options in Southeast Asia right now. India में भी options हैं यार. कुछ ढंग की पढ़ाई कर लो यहीं पे. But आप उधर जाओगे, स्मिता, आप एक बेसमेंट में 20 लोग रह रहे हैं. क्या ये जिंदगी जीने के लिए उधर
Yes,
गए
you
थे?
know, waiting for one, your health factor, whether you have access to emergency health, whether that is there or not, that is a very important point. So when parents make these decisions, they should know that. And not just parents, think about many other things. When you see that wo jo temples mein vandalizing ho rahi hai, when there are race based attacks. So Ajay ji, you know it. I mean, as High Commissioner out there, you've seen so many of these cases of people marrying their daughters out there, and then phas gaye. The girls have
Absolutely.
gone there.
So, there were terrible stories, and the worst of them were the suicides. These kids not being able to adjust, and the dream being completely different, reality being completely different from the dream. So, what I think Kushal and I agree on is that it was a needed correction. There was too many terrible things happening. So, but I would summarize this by saying, go to good universities.
Okay.
Go, if you get admission in a decent university, don't or rethink your choices if you're going as a student, as an immigrant using the student route, going to a hole in the wall, because that can be a miserable life. and that's not easy. And so it's a correction that is happening. The Canadian system itself is realizing that they need that correction. You know, they've been saying that they press the pause button. They need to relook at how they treat these immigrants, how they treat housing, and so on. And so I think that would be the bottom line, that, you know, go research the university, go to a good one.
Yeah, I would recommend everyone to look at this brilliantly well done research paper by the Aristotle Foundation. I had covered it on my podcast too. It is a 22-page PDF document which is freely available. They have shown how real estate and immigration are interrelated, and how this crisis of real estate in Canada is because of that. And they have not even looked at the social costs of it, because that was not part of the research. They were just looking at the economics of immigration and all of that. But the social costs are something, you know, when I was talking with...
But pura research karke, then make an intelligent, informed
Please don't
choice.
go. Please don't
Then
go
go.
right now.
Okay,
Other than
yours
a
is
few...
blanket, don't go.
अरे क्या जरूरत
And
है?
mine is more
Informed choice.
nuanced, that, you know, make informed choices about the university.
Yeah, because I've seen so many horror stories over there now, recently in the last 2 years, that as a human being, यार मैं भी कितने बच्चों को बचा पाऊंगा? I'm being very honest to you. Like मैंने जो गुर्बत देखी है उधर हमारे बच्चों की, मतलब सिख बच्चा हो, हिंदू बच्चा हो, अरे मेरे देश का बच्चा है.
Social media is replete with, and I haven't in the past 2 years met with any parent who's saying that my child is considering applying in Canada, frankly. And I haven't met anybody who's even, you know, meeting with Punjabis of Punjabs, talking in terms of कि हाँ हम लोग रिश्ता ढूंढ रहे हैं Canada में. I don't know, maybe my circle is not the right circle or whatever.
It has dropped.
But
You're right.
It has dropped. When I went 1 year back and we did a whole series in Amritsar trying to, you know, figure out this crisis, at that time there was a whole bunch of people who were saying कि जाना है, जाना है, जाना है. 4 months later, everything changed. 4 months later, whoever I was meeting from that same setup was like, things have changed completely. You know, what we were planning and what had happened, वो सब बदल गया है.
स्मिता, आप हिसाब लगाओ कि अगर...
अच्छा, एक सी चीज़ मैंने आपसे पूछनी है कि there's the Khalistani angle. Now I just want to know, what about the non-Khalistanis? That is the Sikhs who don't believe in Khalistan, the Hindus, the Christians, the Parsis, minorities, whoever the others, the Muslims, what are they looking forward to in this election? How are they seeing it?
That's what we should talk about, because I genuinely believe the Khalistanis, I call it Khalislamism. Khalistanis and Islamists are a unique species, along with the Chinese Communist Party, you know, like a puppeteer managing both the sides very adeptly. But there are normal Canadians where, whether it's a Hindu, whether it's a Sikh, a Muslim, a Christian, anybody, white, black, brown, they're there. This election should have been about Justin Trudeau and his policies. Who got the carbon tax? Justin Trudeau, right? Who had that GST thing on housing? Justin Trudeau. Who is creating problems where you just can't have enough housing? Justin Trudeau. And the Liberal Party. Who was party to all these decisions with Justin Trudeau? Mark Carney. The Liberals want this election to be about Trump, because it helps them deflecting and diverting the actual core problems. क्या कनाडा में घर सस्ते हो गए? नहीं. Have rents fallen? No. Has inflation eased? No. Has your quality of life improved? No. So why is every Canadian thinking that Trump is the problem of everything? And what the Liberals have done to Canada is not the problem. And you know what? My grouse with the Conservatives is that they also fell for the Trump trap. So you are 100% right. Nothing has changed on the ground. I mean, just yesterday, my father-in-law, you know, I just picked him up yesterday at the airport. I got him to India. Abhi thoda hum ghumenge. And I'm like, I asked Dad, kya haal hai udhar? He's like, wahi haal hai, sab महंगा है. You know, अभी मेरे फादर इन लॉ सब्जी लेने तो जाते हैं ना, मेरी मदर इन लॉ सब्जी लेने तो जाती है ना, मैंने बोला कुछ सस्ता हुआ मॉम? नहीं
जीरो।
सर, आप ये सोचिए कि अभी टैरिफ्स लगने के बाद उधर इन्फ्लेशन का क्या हाल होने वाला है. एंड कनाडा इज़ वन ऑफ द यूनिक स्पीशीज ऑन प्लानट अर्थ जिसने कहा रिटेलिएटरी टैरिफ्स लगा दिए. सो नोटिस द ट्रम्प एग्जेम्पशन
या
लिस्ट,
रिटेलिएशन. हाँ,
उसमें चाइना नंबर 1 है ट्रम्प का. ही वांटेड टू कॉर्नर चाइना. सो ये सारा ट्रम्प, सी इट वाज क्लासिक ट्रम्पियनिज्म. यू नो, ही वाज बीइंग ट्रम्पी एज ऑलवेज. सो चाइना फेल फॉर इट. China fell for the trap. Now whatever China
I
does,
don't know whether it was the whole thing was so thought of कि trap है ये है with Trump.
no,
you
but
never know.
eventually he cornered China ना. मगर why did, मतलब एक, see Canada's politics has been the case of अपने पैर पे कुल्हाड़ी मारना नहीं. पहले गाड़ी में जाना, फिर ट्रैफिक में ट्रैवल करना, फिर वो कुल्हाड़ी देखना, ढूंढना और जंप मारना उसके ऊपर. दैट हैज बीन द स्टोरी ऑफ कनाडा. सी विच इज व्हाई योर क्वेश्चन इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. व्हाट अबाउट द एवरेज नॉन खालिस्तानी कैनेडियन,
हाँ.
वाइट, ब्लैक, ब्राउन? ऑनेस्टली मुझे ये लोग पूछ रहे हैं, इफ यू वर अ कैनेडियन पासपोर्ट होल्डर, who would you vote for? My honest answer to them, because that is what.
Please don't say Nota.
No. So my honest answer to them is this. If I am in Mississauga, Brampton, Scarborough, Surrey, Abbotsford, then I am wasting my vote. If I am there. This is me. If I am anywhere else in Canada and my candidate is good, I am voting Conservative. I'm sorry. I can't vote for these liberals. Maaf karo mujhe.
अच्छा.
Okay, so you
Ajit,
know, I don't want to be accused of interfering in Canadian
मैं तो पूरा कर
elections,
रहा हूँ.
so I will not mention who one should vote for.
भाई
But,
हमारा
you
तो
know,
लिस्ट ही आ गया, नाम में लिस्ट आ गया ना.
मैं तो हूँ ना proud foreign interference.
Foreign interference.
But the more important point is that, you know, we are seeing a very important election for Canada. It's not your standard boring Canadian election. This is an inflection point election, not just for India-Canada relations, but for Canada's place in the world. Because Canada's next Prime Minister from May will have to deal with a completely newly defined US relationship. Whether or not Trump plays it this way or that way, this is now a completely integrated polity, economy, security system with its southern neighbor. They will consider being more independent and, you know, getting decoupling in some ways from the United States. That will be an important driver. And Canada will have to redefine its place in the world. So Canada will have to work in its national interests, not just diaspora interests and not just narrow interests. And what will happen then is that, you know, Trump has been talking about 51st state. So are you the 51st state? What do you do as a reaction? There have been jokes in the Canadian media. Do we become the 28th state of Europe? Or if the Khalistanis want it, do you become the 24th district of Punjab? So, you know, you have to
ये
define
identity crisis है यार.
define
I
which
loved this
way
one.
you want to go. Whether you want to be a middle power that
No,
wants
no,
to
but
be a
why
major
are-
power.
Ajay ji, they can become part of Akhand Bharat, no? That also. ले लो तुसी साडे नाल आ जाओ.
So basically, Canada has to redefine its national interest and have independent set of relationships. And I think India will be a very important part of the piece. Given the kind of threat that they'll have from China, given the uncertain relationship with the US, they will have to diversify their relationships, strengthen their economy. And I think that is the direction they need to move.
So will Ottawa, I mean, you've been there as High Commissioner, will Ottawa be working with India, whoever comes in now?
I have a feeling yes, because, you know, I think there'll be adults in the room. They will look at national interest.
I like the way, without saying, he says what
love
he
how
said.
he says patak.
There's a reason why he's been such a successful High Commissioner wherever he was.
Well, you know, it is, you have to assume rationality, and I think the rational course for Canada post-elections is to have a strong relationship with India and take it forward, you know, so, and not make the mistakes of the past, not make the mistakes of the last 18 months in the way this relationship was handled. You know, there will be issues. Stuff happens, you know, so you have to contain these things in boxes and look at the big picture and move on, you know, and so hopefully that is what Canada is going to do.
So when you were High Commissioner, did you meet with Jagmeet? And what was your experience with the
No,
Khalistanis?
I did not, because at that point we were not sure whether they will be having a genuine conversation or be grandstanding, and taking pictures and saying X or Y. So that diplomatic space was missing. Diplomacy, 95% of it should be beneath the surface, like the iceberg, But if everything becomes public and you have those open, public, grandstanding conversations, it doesn't work. We weren't sure they were willing to have that kind of conversation. We were willing to have a quiet conversation saying that, look, it's not in Canada's interest, if you're representing Canada's interest, to have this terrible relationship with India. Why don't you move on? Why go into 20th century problems when we are in the 21st century? So I think there is a sense we have now that the system at least wants to move on, and the new Prime Minister will receive that advice from the Canadian system, and hopefully we'll have a much better, more stable relationship where when stuff happens, the diplomats and the security experts get together and deal with it rather than make a grand political spectacle of it.
So now that Jagmeet has got his pension, do you think the fire is out from his belly? And will the NDP be totally wiped out? How much did they get? 24, 25 seats last time?
Yeah, so they got enough seats last time to remain relevant. This time the polls suggest that they're going to get into single digits. So it depends on, either all the polls are wrong, I don't know. So if that is the case, then
Jo India wala haal hai, you never know.
How do you know, right? You're not going to go and physically check each and every poll sample size. Like 2 or 3 polls were really shoddy. So, they were only polling Ontario and projecting it on.
And also vote percentage. It all depends on whether they vote also. People are feeling motivated enough.
That's the thing.
Vote.
There are too many permutation combinations. My hunch is like I said, a hung parliament. My genuine hunch is a hung parliament. But let's see what happens. On the Jagmeet Singh issue, it's very important for both Canada and India that Jagmeet Singh loses and his party gets basically finished electorally, is because unlike others, Jagmeet is a true believer. Right? He's a true believer. He is a radicalized person. Now, अभी वो हवा के झोंके के जैसे किधर भी बदल जाएगा तो मुझे नहीं मालूम, क्योंकि आफ्टर ऑल जगमीत इज अ पॉलिटिशियन, बट आई नो इनफ थिंग्स, मोस्ट ऑफ इट विच आई कैन नॉट से हियर about Jagmeet, that you can't rely on that person. For Canada's sake, listen, as much as I have a very low opinion of the man-child, Trudeau, Trudeau 1.0, when he had the majority, was still bearable. Then this coalition Khichdi Trudeau, that's where Trudeau really was under pressure. I'm not giving Trudeau an excuse. I am no fan. But the point being is, Sir is right that Canada is at an inflection point as a society. They clearly have to redefine their relationship with America. And right now they have just realized that, all our eggs were in one basket, which is the American. Basically, 90% of the society is basically at an X square kilometer radius of an American border. That society lives by the American border. 90% of that society. So America ke upar 60 to 70% trade happens with Americans. They are truly dependent on America. Now, I think my friend Harsh Madhusudan Gupta gave the most beautiful line when I read that Globe article with him sitting at a Starbucks in Mumbai. And Harsh read that article, the recent article on foreign interference by India by Stuart Bell. And Harsh said it beautifully. Every time the Chinese interfere in Canadian affairs, Canada makes it a point to write an article about India. It is what China is trying to do in Canada is what decides the future of Canada. It has nothing to do with what India does. It has nothing to do with what America does. It is the Chinese interference in Canada that is going to decide the fate of Canada. Canada needs to be very careful. Just yesterday, RCMP officers released a press statement about 8 to 9 Liberal Party leaders. And one of them is, by the way, Anita Anand. And what they have done and why they should be removed. These are damning things that are written by Canadian officers and representatives. I love Canadian elections. I'm just following everything that's happening there. And I'm party agnostic. I don't care who wins beyond a point. But if Canada is serious, they have to do something about the Chinese interference. The entire shenanigans. This was the Hogue Commission that Sir was talking about.
And we have to remember that the commission, why was it formed? It was formed because there were accusations and credible accusations of Chinese interference in the elections in 2021 and 19. And once it gets formed and this bit of politics played out, for good measure, they put in India and even
Smita
Russia
Prakash.
into it. And exactly.
Anand Ranganathan.
So,
we are
so
in
they
foreign
randomly
interference.
load on these all of you onto a commission, where at the end of it, the Hope Commission, pronounces that there was nothing really
Nothing.
that happened. But the Chinese interference was for real, and that is what was the issue. The political issue that happened was that Trudeau was accused by the Conservatives of being asleep at the wheel because it was benefiting the Liberal Party that Chinese interference was taking place. So how does he politically react to it? He said, let me get the India issue and let me say that I was not asleep at the wheel. I was preempting the India issue. And he tried to play the same gambit, as we realize in retrospect, with Trudeau when he go hot foots it to Florida to try and get a deal, thinking that this will, up his political equity. It didn't happen. So, in retrospect, what he did with India was really a reaction to the accusation that he had about being, played by the Chinese. So, I think these are factors that will be debated in China, but as observers, we need to be in Canada, but we need to be watching this carefully and seeing this whole dynamic as it
So,
emerges.
the term trade war is used very loosely, but it is literally a trade war now. And what do you see? Who's going to win in this trade war? Is it America versus the rest of the world, or is it China versus America? And is it the end of NATO? How do you see this in a larger picture? And of course, I'll come to the part about India.
Yeah.
Where do we fall into this?
The tariff war is much more complex because, I think what Trump has done is conflated the objectives. It's being called reciprocal tariffs, whereas they are anything but. They are an attempt to reindustrialize America. To say that, okay, we want the supply chains in India, in the US, so therefore we'll have tariff barriers so that people start investing in the United States. And the belief that the US was being taken for a ride, it's also about earning money through tariffs and reducing taxes. But, much of it is voodoo economics. It's not really economics. Most economists agree that that's not the way it's done. And anyway, if you want to reindustrialize and rationalize tariffs, it takes you 5 years, not just in 2 weeks. So this was a negotiating position. It was also playing to the base. It was about China, certainly, because, this is the number one and number two power in the world, having it out in a contestation. But the Mexico-Canada piece of this was a negotiating tactic to improve the terms of the CUSMA, which was negotiated in Trump's first term. And, so when